Now, if you're looking at this spot, you won't believe that this spot actually survived an outbreak of fungal infection. When you tend to look at this spot of succulent, you might think that these are sunburn caused because of lack of acclimation. That's completely incorrect. And we are going to be talking about that in this video, how I was able to contain this issue. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Lush Gardener. Today the pot that we are looking at was completely infested with powdery mildew. Now in 7 years of me keeping succulents, my succulents never had this issue. These were purchased some time back, and because they were recently purchased, they were kept in indirect bright light in order for them to get acclimated. But unfortunately, you might have seen how my weather happened to change. There was rains out of nowhere because of the cyclone. So the environment, the climate had completely taken a turn. Now, ideally, my environment is slightly cooler during the winters, but along with the rains, the temperatures had dropped down a lot. Now, how did this outbreak happen? I am not very sure, but I assume that the plants already had the infection when they arrived, because when I had got these plants, I knew something was wrong with these plants, and that's why I had kept them in a separate container. So all of these lot were kept in one container, and they were completely isolated from other succulents, and they were kept in indirect bright light. Now, ideally, it should have worked out really well, but there were certain factors that aggravated the powdery mildew. So the fungus that started on this, or the fungal attack that started on this, was something called as powdery mildew. I'm not sure if it's called as mold or a fungus, but it is powdery mildew. I will share the images of how it exactly looks, because over here the powdery mildew has been killed. That's why it looks very different, but ideally the powdery mildew tends to look very different when it is in its active form. I will also put up the picture on the screen. So here, as you can see, this is how the powdery mildew starts. On echeverias it looks like this. On other succulents it's going to look a little bit different. So what I happen to do, or I would say before we come to the conclusion of how to treat it or what I did in order to control it, let's talk about what are the factors that can cause powdery mildew. There are a couple of factors. Major factors are related with environment. Now, usually the active growing period or the fungus is very active in winters or during the transition period. When I say transition period, it is when you have your winters ending and you are getting into your summers or early spring. The small little duration in between is when they are in their active growing period. They prefer a very cooler environment, so that is one of the factor. Second factor is the temperature. When the temperatures are cooler, it aggravates this powdery mildew to grow more. Now, I'm not saying that it's only these. It can even happen during the summers. It can even happen during winters, but during winters, it's more common or it is more active. The next factor is that if you have a lot of organic matter in the soil, that can again lead to powdery mildew. Now, if you're wondering, I do not use any organic matter in my soil. You might have seen it's just plain aquarium sand and garden soil. Then how did it show up on my plants? Remember guys, these plants were recently come in. They were with the seller for I don't know how long. The seller had a mix that had a lot of leaf mold. It had a lot of organic matter. How do I know it? Because when I was unwrapping the succulent, I could see a lot of particles, a lot of decomposed leaf mold falling out, leaf compost falling out from the tissue. And that's how I realized that the soil mix, what the seller had used, was a very organic soil mix. So probably the succulent was already infested. As I said, I was not very sure. They looked a little bit dicey when I got in. So probably the infestation had already started. When it came into my place, because of the cooler climate and because it started to rain, the mold had more chance to get more active, and that's how it started to spread. And I had not cleaned the root area completely. There was a little bit of matter still left. I thought that is not going to make much of an issue, so I went ahead and planted them into this soil. Even though my soil mix is not very organic rich, but there was a lot of organic matter on the root area, which was a mistake on my end. I should have cleaned it completely. After which it started to rain. As you all know, it was raining day and night for continuous 3 to 4 days. So the environment was very humid. There was a lot of moisture. It was cold. The surrounding was very damp. Again, that also aggravated or contributed towards the growth of the mold or the powdery mildew. All of these factors played a very important role. Apart from that, because the succulent was still being acclimated, it was not in direct sunlight. Any which ways, there was no direct sunlight. There was only indirect bright light. That again helped the powdery mildew to colonize and spread onto the other succulents. Now over here, as you can see, this was the first one from where it all started, because you can see it has the majority amount of scars. I will talk about the scars later on. So you can see this is how it spread. So it spread from here onto this one, then this, and on little bit of this one. So it started to spread. So I'm just going to show you how I tend to mix the raw milk with water and then I apply it on the succulent. Probably I try it on the succulent itself, so I'm going to show you too. So now for the process of application, you would require a Q-tip. You would require 2 to 3 drops of milk, and then you just need some water. Now I'm not very sure about boiled milk. This was just a regular milk from the refrigerator, which is not boiled, and you just add some water to dilute it, probably 1/4 of it, and that's about it. So once that's done, you just take the Q-tip and stir it a little bit so that the application of the milk and the water gets diluted. And now it's plain and simple. Just take the Q-tip wherever you see the powdery mildew. I'll show it on the image how it tends to look like. For example, if this is how the powdery mildew is on the leaf, so you just take the Q-tip and touch on the powdery mildew. You do not need to spread everywhere, just touch it on the powdery mildew itself. Like over here, for example, if I have it, if suppose this was the powdery mildew, I'll take the Q-tip and just clean it off like this. Now, during this application, you might have a question, what about the farina? Of course, the farina is going to get disturbed. But right now, your farina is secondary. Treating the powdery mildew is primary. Because if you're able to stop the powdery mildew, you will be able to save the succulent. If there is no succulent, there is not going to be any farina. So that's very important. So just clean it off like this. Now, another important thing, just try to control your emotions. You might feel very excited, you might feel very frustrated. Do not take this entire thing and pour it on the succulent. It might not work, it might cause some other issues, so please be very careful. Do not take this entire thing and pour it on the succulent. It might lead to some other problem. So all you have to do is just touch, just dip the Q-tip, try to take out the excess and just clean off wherever you tend to see. For example, if you see the powdery mildew over here, just touch and rub it off like this in the circular motion. It's usually in a round form, so you have to do it completely. Everything should get dissolved with the help of that milk. If you find there is anything excess, just clean it off with the dry side. That's all about it. Now this application has to be done in sun. It cannot be done in indirect bright light. It has to be done in the sun, because the milk is going to react with the sun and then it's going to be effective in eliminating the powdery mildew. If you are not going to do it in the sun, it might not be very effective. Now, as per the research, what I have learned is even the scientists are not exactly sure how does this milk happen to help. But their speculation is that most likely they think the proteins in the milk, they interact with the sun to create a very brief antiseptic effect on the succulent. So when that happens, it tends to kill the powdery mildew in a very effective way, and hence does not let it reproduce or spread onto the other plants. This is what the article says. Now there is another thing. After you apply all the milk or probably any insecticide or fungicide, it is gonna definitely leave a scar on your succulent. Now in this case, it's because of the milk burn marks, because the milk will burn the powdery mildew. It is going to burn that fungus, due to which it leaves the scars. Now guys, this is not only going to happen with milk. Even if you're going to use hydrogen peroxide, or if you're going to use any kind of fungicide as well, it is going to leave some scars, because I'm going to share some pictures. My friend was also very successful in containing the powdery mildew. She happened to use peroxide. She also happened to use milk. After I had told her, she also used milk and she used some fungicide. Luckily, it was all contained. It did not spread onto the other leaves. She did an excellent job with containing the fungus, because with the frills, the succulents that have the frills, or the succulent which is Echeveria Shaviana, which have these frills, they are also very prone to powdery mildew. So she was able to contain it with the milk because that worked out really well. But you can see it has left a little bit of scars on the lower leaves, and that's exactly how it works. The main source from where the powdery mildew has generated, that spot is already starting to be eaten by the fungus. So when you tend to when the plant starts to heal from the powdery mildew, it is going to leave a lot of scars. So irrespective of what you apply, it is still going to leave scars. We can't do much about it, but you do not need to be worried, because as and when the plant is going to grow, the scars will be hidden. At this point of time, you should not be worried much about the scars, but you should be much worried about containing that powdery mildew, because powdery mildew tends to spread very fast. It has a lot of spores. Those spores can land up on the other succulent, and that can spread. Now here I had taken, I would say this was the experiment child. It was a very big risk leaving my Lola in this spot because it was not infected with the powdery mildew. But I wanted to see what's going to happen after I apply milk, whether that powdery mildew is still going to transfer onto my Lola, because this is going to be a very big experiment to know whether the fungus can be contained or not. So the experiment was successful. The powdery mildew did not transfer onto the Lola. It was contained only to this 3 or 4 succulents. This one, this Graptovaria had a very small one over here, as you can see. I think it's not going to be very visible, but here it is. This was the only one, and this is edema. This is not fungus, but this is the fungus, powdery mildew, that was attacked on the lowest leaf. So it did not spread on the entire succulent, and my Lola, though it was sitting in the same or very close proximity to the powdery mildew, if I had not used milk, if I had not contained it, definitely my Lola, my Echeveria Lola, would also have got affected with the powdery mildew, but it did not spread onto it. So that means that the experiment was successful. Now it is still in the early phase. I am still working on it. I still need to understand a little bit more whether it is going to appear once again or not. Right now it is being exposed to indirect bright light. Now the environment is no longer moist, it's no longer humid, it's little bit warm because the sun is out. So probably now the powdery mildew is going to reduce because it cannot be very active. A lot of its factors are missing, like there is not much moisture, there is not much humidity, there's a lot of warmth, there is a lot of heat, there is a lot of sunlight. They do not like sunlight a lot. So probably this will get contained, but I'm still on the phase of working on it. But so far it looks like a very positive result with raw milk. But we will see in future. I will definitely keep you updated in future what exactly is happening and what are the things that have been progressed. If the Lola is still infected or not, we will work on it. But this is how so far I was able to contain this mold without the use of any fungicide or any chemicals. That is something that I was very worried about. I have never used any chemicals in my garden, so using of any fungicide or a pesticide is something that I was very reluctant about using, and I was like, is that the only way that I can protect my succulents by using chemicals? Probably I can try some organic way. So when I did this Google search, this is the article that I happened to read, and it has made wonders. I was able to contain the the fungus. So it's a very good breakthrough for me because I don't have to use any chemicals. I was not even thinking of, I would have rather lost this succulent rather than spraying any chemicals. But if this has worked out really well, this is the best organic method that I could approach for this fungus, because this fungus is very aggressive. It tends to spread immediately to all your other plants. I have seen images on Facebook wherein people ask what is wrong with the succulent. I have seen around 15 to 20 succulents in one row completely infested with powdery mildew. So it is very aggressive. It tends to move very fast onto the plants because there are so many thousands of pores on it that immediately tends to spread. It just flies off with the breeze or with the air, and it lands up on the other succulent, and it starts with the new colony on the succulent. So this has worked out really well. So what about the scars? Unfortunately, we cannot do much about it. You just leave it as it is. As and when there is new growth, these scars will be hidden. Now for me personally, it is not much of an issue. I feel that these scars are good. They tend to indicate that your succulent is a fighter, is a survivor. It has survived through a deadly infection and it has come out really strong. Scars are not ugly, they are beautiful. They indicate that your succulent is a fighter. Scars are basically the pride of a fighter, survivor, or a warrior. So that's all about it. I hope that this video was helpful to you. If it was, please hit the like button. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing to it. Until then, take care, stay safe, and keep propagating.